back to Northwest City Politics in the Know with Juanita. We're glad to welcome you back to our show again this week. We're always happy for people like you, people that are interested in what's happening in our cities. Now, if you haven't watched our show before, each week we'll have someone from the CCX viewing area, one of the 9 cities, people that can talk with us about what's happening in the city or just happened or is going to happen in the future, so you can be connected in if it's your city. So we'll encourage you, if it's your city or it's an area that really interests you, take down the name and phone number of people. And tonight we're very happy to welcome Mayor Shep from Golden Valley. It's been a little while, so we're glad to have you back on our show again.
Thank you.
And I let you introduce yourself out to our wider audience. People in Golden Valley, I'm sure, are pretty well and know you pretty much, but other people might not.
Right. Well, I'm very fortunate that I'm going on my 9th year as mayor of Golden Valley, so I'd hope that the people of Golden Valley might be more familiar with me. But for those who don't live in Golden Valley, or maybe have just moved to Golden Valley, so my wife and I moved to Golden Valley more than 15 years ago. I have to think about how old one of my children, my middle child is. And we moved from St. Louis Park. We've been in Minnesota for 22 years, going on 23. And we moved here. I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, but by way of Washington, D.C., where I met my wife. And she's a Wisconsinite, so we thought we'd move kind of back closer to home for her. And so we planted roots here 22 plus years ago.
And very involved in your community.
Yes, you could say that, yeah.
Which is good, because that's what we're always encouraging people out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Get involved. Be part of what's going on in your city. And then, now, there's several up-and-coming events that I thought we should let people know about, and you can give a little more information about it, but there's a Status of the City event.
State of the City.
State of the City, and that's going to be Friday, March 6th at 10 a.m. in the new Bohemia restaurant.
That's right.
But you can tell people what will they see if they come.
Right. Well, for starters, it's all around this redesign, this downtown redesign. New Bohemia is located in the southwest quadrant. It is part of the Golden Valley Shopping Mall. And so we chose specifically and symbolically to have the State of the City address there. To really send a message out to people that we are taking this seriously, that we really want to move forward and see what can be done to make our downtown area even better, make it more pedestrian friendly. We've also heard from residents who want a few more restaurants to go out to. They're not looking for, Dave and Buster's or something like that, but they like the Miltons and Crystals, in City of Crystal, which, by the way, is owned by a Golden Valley resident. They're looking for those types of neighborhood restaurants. So that's why we chose New Bohemia, because it's got that local neighborhood feel. And but what people will see is they're going to hear about the state of the city. I mean, we are in good shape. We're in excellent shape. And what are the accomplishments from 2019? What are the goals that we're planning for 2020 and beyond, including the focus on this downtown redesign? And then, it's nothing like having some beer and brats afterwards, to polish off a good discussion about downtown redesign and our city budget.
A good place to hold it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the presidential primary is March 3rd. Tell people what they should know about that.
Well, if you're like my wife, for example, she's going to be out of town. Fortunately, not just in Golden Valley, but in every community, you can do absentee ballot voting now. You can already go. So in Golden Valley, you can go to City Hall and you can vote absentee. It was last week, we were welcoming some state legislators to our City Hall, and in the main lobby area, you've got those voting little mobile booths right there for people already to do the absentee ballot voting. Otherwise, on March 3rd, it's just like a regular election. You go to your precinct location, voting location, polling location, And the only difference in this case is, which is getting a lot of attention, is that you do have to designate which party you're in, who you want to vote for, and in the Republican primary, there's one person you can vote for. In the Democrat primary, there are, I think, 15 people on the ballot, so you have quite the choice. So, what I say is the turn on out, because I have a feeling that March 3rd is really going to make a big difference in terms of who we see on the ballot this November.
Yeah, and now Minnesota is in the primaries, which they weren't before, and they're going to be in the one of the early larger groupings of votes.
Yep. And we have no apps on the phone that will possibly like go haywire and screw things up like what happened to the south of us in Iowa.
I'm sure people are checking everything twice, right? before that date comes by.
Yep.
But there isn't anything brand new into the voting. So
No. And our city clerk, who is in charge of our elections, there's the city clerks that do the elections are very well tied in with the county election system and with the Secretary of State's system. So from a security and an integrity perspective, we're pretty good.
Oh, yes.
We're one of the better ones in the country.
And I think you're one of the larger voting turnouts of the cities in this area, aren't you?
We do pretty well. Not to be, we're Minnesotans, right? So we do what I call the humble brag. We don't really put it out there really hard, but I'm really proud. In an election year like this, we will see for sure at least 85% voter turnout. If not, I'm willing to bet in November we're going to see plus 90%.
Oh, I bet that's going to be an active one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then just to encourage people, if you're not sure if you're registered to vote, go to the Minnesota Secretary of State site, go to the elections area, and there's a place where you can just plug it in and they'll tell you whether you're registered. If you are, fine, because if you're voting regularly and there hasn't been too much of a time limit, you're okay. But if it's been a while, be sure to do that, because you can take care of it easily right on the internet.
But you don't have much time left. I believe the deadline for pre-registration is February 11th.
Went by that.
Right, and so if you haven't pre-registered,
then go to City Hall.
You just go to City Hall. You can do it there. Of course, if you miss that deadline, you know the great thing about Minnesota is you can do same-day voter registration.
Right. No, I was going to lead up to that. If you do it ahead of time, it'd make it easier, but you can register when you go to vote.
Right.
And we want everybody that can get to the voting place. And if you have handicapped issues, there's this different help for you there too.
Yes, that is correct.
And then the last event that I've got is Run the Valley, and that's April 18th at 8 a.m. at Brookville.
That's right. That's our, gosh, I've lost count now, but it's 20 plus years now that we've been doing it. We have our 5K, we have our 10K. You can run it, you can walk it, you can, if you are in a wheelchair, it's accessible in that respect as well. And it's all for a good cause. Because this is one of two primary fundraisers for our Human Services Fund.
Right.
And so our Human Services Commission has a fund, and it serves as a foundation, basically, raising money that then is distributed at the end of the year to human service organizations that help people in Golden Valley.
Right.
So it ranges from like PRISM, who are dealing with hunger issues and clothing issues and financial issues, or it's I'm trying to think of another, Greater Minneapolis Crisis Nursery, which is helping young parents deal with crisis in their life and working with those families, kind of getting upstream at what are some of the trauma issues happening to them and trying to help their young children too. So that money is raised from Run the Valley. So we're looking forward to it. It's just dress appropriately. Sometimes it's a little chilly. Sometimes it's,
you never know.
It's a nice sunny day. Yeah, you never know. Yeah, especially springtime. Right. But it's worth it.
So keep all those events in mind and plug them into your schedule as you have the time for the people out in Golden Valley. And then we'll talk a little bit more about your Golden Valley Equity Task Force, because we've kind of referred to it, but tell us about the history of it as you were, because if you go back a long, long ways, I think Golden Valley was one of the first cities to really get involved in Black History Month and some of those activities. So maybe you can tell us about the history.
Right. So sure, we have a Human Rights Commission. In fact, we're one of the first. Some will say we are the first city in the state to have a Human Rights Commission, going back to the 1960s. But we felt that it was important to create this equity task force, this Rising Tides task force, because we had an equity plan that we drafted and designed several years ago, but really feel like it scratched the surface. And so we have recruited members of our community who come from all walks of life, whether they're from the African American community or the GLBTQ community or the Jewish community or from the Latino community, and we actually have a few spaces open, so we're trying to diversify even further the task force. And what we're looking at is 3 main areas.
Okay.
That's kind of how we whittled it down, because we could have gone off in so many different directions.
Right.
But what we realized, what are the top priorities when it comes to creating an equitable community? And number 1 is, how do we diversify our city's workforce? And when I say city's workforce, I'm not talking about like General Mills or Allianz. I'm talking about the city of Golden Valley, its workforce.
Your staff.
Right. How do we make it more diverse? We also are looking at who do we do business with? Who do we contract with? And as it turns out, we actually do a decent job when it comes to contracting with businesses owned by women. But when it comes to contracting or outsourcing services to companies owned by disadvantaged communities or communities of color, not so good. So we're looking at how do we change that?
Sure.
Because we're being vulnerable at this moment. I'm actually really proud of our city's leadership, our city staff, and frankly our community to say, we're not perfect. We don't have all the answers.
Right.
And so tell us, where do we go? How do we recruit? Who do we recruit to? How do we pull them in? Because historically, cities like ours have basically said, hey, the door is wide open, you're welcome to walk in.
Right.
And for some people, yeah, that's easy because they have a regular 9-to-5 job. But for others who are working 2 jobs or maybe have to work a night shift, who are unfortunately in unstable housing situation and are having to move on a regular basis, that's not so easy. So that's why that's a reason why they're not engaged. How do we engage them? So diversifying our city workforce, and the last, as I mentioned before, is creating more diverse programs and services for our community. And I use the language as an example of something like that. But have all of our summer concert in the series, concert in the park series, have they all been music that's by American composers, American bands? Should we have music that might be from a different country?
Oh, sure.
That speaks to certain elements within our community. So those are things that we're looking at, and we're looking forward to seeing some final recommendations at the end of this year. And I think there's going to be some interesting opportunities here for us to look at.
And so your task force does have room for some more people on it?
We do.
So we'll encourage you in Golden Valley, if this is an area you've been thinking of getting involved in, definitely contact City Hall.
Please do. Please do. I think we have 3 openings right now, and we have a couple of people who are applying right now, but I still think we have 1 space open.
Now, how often does the Rising Tides Task Force meet?
So they meet, great question, they meet once a month on the second Tuesday of the month from 5:15 to 6:15. And there's a little homework, if you will, that you have to do between the meetings. But it's generally a 1-hour meeting time, second Tuesday of the month.
And about how many people are on the task force, or what's it set up to be?
So we have a total, right now we have 8 people, but we have space for 11.
And they can just contact City Hall?
Contact City Hall.
Or is there a specific person?
Yep, specifically right now, the person to contact would be our Human Resources Director. That's Kirsten Santaleses. And Kirsten, as I mentioned, she's our Human Resources Director who is helping to run the task force. But hopefully going forward, we actually are, we have been publicizing just recently, we're creating a position, it's a hybrid, part-time volunteer coordinator, but the other part-time is an equity coordinator. And so that equity coordinator is going to really hone in on the work and with the equity task force. and move those recommendations forward. So, but for right now, Kirsten is our go-to person.
It's just so people know, and hopefully some of you out there will respond.
Thank you.
And the city budget is just kind of getting started for next year, because you've already set the city budget for this year. What were the priorities that were important in the budget that just got passed in December?
Right. Well, so we have roughly our general fund budget is about $20 million.
Okay.
And then we also have some bonded debt, some debt that we pay for. So we borrow money.
Right.
We bond for some infrastructure projects. So the total budget is a little bit over $25 million. And so you got your typical bread and butter issues that you can think of, police, fire, just the day-to-day services. I mean, this is wintertime, right? So we've got snow plowing, exactly. And then, and after snow plowing, what comes after that? The street sweeping, because we got to sweep up all the deposits, the sediment from the snow in springtime, right? And then after that, then you've got the branch collection. So there's those types of services, and of course we've got our park and recreation department and all of those programs and activities that happen throughout the year. So all that adds up. But what we, with the city council and with the senior staff, looked at this past year, in addition to all those regular items, and are we doing them well? Can we do them more efficiently, more cost effectively? And so we looked at some of those, but we also realized the issue of mental illness has become much more of a challenge in our community, in most communities.
Right.
The fact is, we as a society are acknowledging it. We're not shaming it. And we're here to help. And so we already had one police officer that was designated to be a mental health police officer in our community. And we realized very quickly last year that one police officer was being overwhelmed and inundated with calls for assistance. And so part of our budget now is to add a second mental health police officer. So that's one important piece, one highlight for me that's important. I mentioned before that hybrid position that we created. It's really kind of what we have different buckets, if you will. That we have our priorities, and this bucket we call the community affairs. So that's where the coordinator is for equity and for volunteerism. And so that was a new position that we added, because more people in our community are stepping up, asking to volunteer, looking to volunteer. And in some cases, maybe they're working with the school district. Other cases, they're working with a nonprofit organization. In other cases, they don't know where to go. So we are looking to provide that service. So that those are just two examples there that came out of the budget. And then we're doing other things, for example, with the downtown redesign. That costs money. It also costs money when we have to look at where the facilities are going to go. Where do we put our new public safety building? Is it fire and police together? Are they separate? Where are they going to be? And we've already taken one look at where one of the fire stations would have gone. And that recommendation was not accepted by the city council recently, but it was about putting it in Scheid Park. And the city council basically said, no, that's not good. So some of the funding in the budget for this year includes a new look at not just public safety building, but also where do we put those maintenance buildings so that we can open up City Hall campus for more housing, or to merge the library and City Hall. So those are just a few examples on our budget.
Now, what happens with your next year's budget at this point in time?
Well, right now we're kind of like groundhogs. We've gone underground for winter time. The staff is doing a lot of the number crunching work right now behind the scenes. They're putting together what they see the needs are for the next year's budget. And then that is compiled and condensed, if you will, by our city manager and presented to the city council, not until August. And so from August through December, that's when we do more of the public hard work.
And people that want to follow it, that's a good time to dip into the process, because they can come and watch the meetings as you're going through the budget and have a better idea of how and why you get to the decisions.
Exactly, and we plow through thick books of budget recommendations. August, September, October. We approve a preliminary levy in September. so that people are made aware of what the maximum levy could potentially be.
Right.
And then in December, we approved the final tax, property.
And then something that we talked about last year sometime, you set up a bike lane, bicycle and pedestrian task force. Maybe you can tell us about what they've been doing and where they're at. It was in regards to striping the roads and...
Right. So we've had, and I have another prop here, which I'll show you in a moment, but we have a bike and pedestrian task force that has met for the past couple of years, and we were able to take the recommendations from these residents about how to create better connections throughout the community, how to draw more people into the downtown area or to our parks or to our already existing trail systems. And how can we better make connections? And what we've done is we've incorporated that into our 2040 comprehensive plan, so that we're not able to, you can't change the world in a day, right? And so for that reason, this is a staggered, staged process.
Sure.
And so we've already taken some of those recommendations and put them into practice. So for example, along Olympia Street, which is a major artery through the community, what we're doing is, the recommendation actually was to create bike lanes and to potentially remove parking from Olympia Street. But we heard a lot of good feedback from our residents, and so what we decided to do was, instead of designating a bike lane, we would put these laminated decals on the street with a bike, the bike sign, if you will, and what's called a sharrow, basically arrows above the bike stencil, so that it's indicating to drivers and to bikers that this is a shared road. People on bikes are welcome, but we have to share the road.
Oh, definitely.
The cars have to share it with the bikes have to share it with the cars. And so it's about being more cautious and more safe. On Glenwood Avenue, that is a county designated road. We recommended to the county that they create, and this is from Highway 100 to Theodore Wirth Parkway. So going east from Highway 100, we recommended that there are designated bike lanes with protective barriers, and that we ban parking. Not we, but the county bans parking. Now it's the county's road, so they're taking that under advisement. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do it. But again, that was part of our bike and pedestrian task force plan and recommendations. And so here's an example in the downtown area. You see all sorts of different colored lines here.
Oh, yes, I do.
And so what we're doing is we're taking, this is somewhat from our bike and pedestrian task force. And so again, we're trying to draw more people and traffic into the downtown area. And so over time, some of this will be implemented. It depends again on what we're able to, the private property developers and what they'll allow, what they won't allow. So we're trying to figure that out. But the task force has been extremely helpful in terms of giving some recommendations. But what we want to do is, task force is not infinite. It has an endpoint, a beginning and an endpoint. So what we've decided to do is actually take the task force and roll it into our Park and Recreation Commission. So that they'll be able, the recommendations and the work will continue on in perpetuity.
Fit together, right. Then, in another area that, looking back to what's already been done, there was a lot of discussion on the fact that Golden Valley has lots of various sizes, and what size should they be, and can they divide it into two, and that's gone on for quite a while, right?
Correct. So
that was in the past year. So I thought we'd touch base on what had happened.
Well, it's still going. It's still going. In fact, it was part of the part of our annual goals. We have what we call, let's see if I'm looking in the right place here, in terms of narrow lots, our narrow lots study. It's one of our ongoing action steps that we set in process last year, but it's required some additional study. So here's the quick backstory. For many years, most of the areas in our city have very wide plats, if you will, or plots. Anywhere from 80 feet wide, 120 feet wide, or maybe in some cases people have bought two properties and put them together and it's even wider. However, there's about 4 different neighborhoods in Golden Valley that were platted prior to Golden Valley even being not only a city, but even before it was a village. I mean, we're talking going back more than 130 plus years ago.
Right.
These are communities or neighborhoods that are, in some cases, adjacent to the city of Minneapolis.
Okay.
So they kind of copied off of Minneapolis'
Sure.
very narrow plats.
Right.
And so what you're looking at is you have some properties that are 40 feet in width, 50, 60, 65 feet in width. And what they did a long time ago, some of the original owners of these properties bought 2 adjacent properties, built the house right in the middle, and now they've sold off that property. A developer has demolished the house and is now selling the properties separate and building. So what you're getting is people are used to some pretty wide space in Golden Valley. We're very fortunate in that respect. We have a really good tree canopy throughout all of our neighborhoods.
Yeah, you do.
And we're very fortunate. And the problem, though, is that it's changing the character of some of our neighborhoods. And some of our neighbors are very concerned about that. And so in response to that, we are doing this study, and we're going to look at some recommendations next month in March about how to try to protect the character of the neighborhoods. Because we can't change those plats. Those are set by basically
they're legally set.
They're legally set. They're set with the county. We can't change them. But we can change the definition of what kind of house gets built there. So that you don't wind up building a McMansion on a postage stamp sized piece of property. Yeah.
And so in March, what were you going to do?
So that's where we will look at some recommendations that have, and we've done a couple of public meetings to get feedback on this. And our Planning Commission has been really diving deeply into this topic with our staff to figure out what can be done based on the feedback that they've gotten from residents. So we had a developer on a panel at one of our forums last month. It was fascinating about how he was suggesting how you can adjust the height of wall sizes so that you get you don't get a second story, but you're still able to get a pitched roof as opposed to a flat roof. And so that was one example that struck me, and we'll see if the staff and the Planning Commission and the residents think that that's a good idea as well, because then you're getting perhaps a one-level house with a pitched roof as opposed to a very tall, skinny, gargantuan type of house that's towering over
the next door neighbor.
Exactly.
Yeah, you had a lot of citizen input on that subject over the past year, haven't you?
We have. I think there's been concern about some of our lots being subdivided, and so we've made some changes and I believe improvements to that 4 or 5 years ago. And this is kind of a cousin to that issue. I mean, it's about the character of your neighborhood.
Important.
You move into your neighborhood because you like it and you want it to stay that way and you don't want it to change. And we agree with that. And so we're trying to help protect that character.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time with our audience. We're glad that you've been with us and invite you to join